Welcome to Inside Outside Innovation, episode 109. Taylor Dawson is a founding member of GE Appliances FirstBuild Microfactory. In addition to his conversation with Brian, he spoke at the Inside Outside Innovation Summit in May. He had some great stories to tell about FirstBuild's origins and the obstacles they've conquered and the challenges they're still solving. IO Innovation is the podcast that brings you the best and brightest in the world of startups and innovation. It is hosted by Brian Ardinger, founder of Next, a provider of research, events, and consulting services that helps innovators and entrepreneurs build better products, launch new ideas, and compete in a world of change and disruption.
We were at the IO Summit a couple weeks ago, and I was just talking to you before we went live here that I must have had about 20 people come up to me after the show saying, hey, that discussion that we had with Taylor was awesome. And so I wanted to get you on the podcast to tell a little bit about some of the things that you've been in this space of innovation and some of the things that you've learned. So kind of to get us started and to give the audience a little bit of background, you're with Giddy right now, which is a open product development platform and that, but you started out kind of in the corporate innovation space. And so why don't you give us a little bit of background on how did you get into the innovation space to begin with?
I will. First, let me give a quick plug for the IO Summit. It's a good reason to go to Nebraska in the summertime. I really enjoyed it. It was really well put together.
Thanks.
To answer your question about how we got into it, interesting story. A lot of your audience will probably be pretty familiar with concepts of the lean startup as popularized by Eric Ries. So he was a consultant for GE corporate. At that time, GE Appliances was owned by GE. Now it's actually owned by a Chinese company, but that's a different story. So he had helped come up with this initiative internally that was called FastWorks. And so I became aware of Lean Startup actually as a corporate employee. I'd never heard of it. It was about 2014. I became aware of it through this FastWorks program. So I heard about FastWorks and I was immediately excited. I was an engineering manager at the time. So I had a group of 8 engineers I was overseeing. And engineers, of course, have lots and lots of cool ideas, and they generally feel like they don't have the capacity to get them out into the world. And so when we started talking about this, we realized that some of these ideas that we had internally might have some way, an escape valve, in a sense, of getting out into the world. And so the idea that we were working on at the time was actually a Keurig K-Cup built into a refrigerator. Huh. And so the way that this model was supposed to work for our business was there was a VC panel. I use the word VC with kind of air quotes around it. It was the CEO, the CTO, the head of R&D, and the head of product. And every 2 weeks, employees would have the opportunity to take their idea in front of that panel and get effectively funded with a certain amount of money and for a certain amount of time, obviously a small budget and a small amount of time to prove out whether or not the idea was good, see if they could get some validated learning on the project. And so I thought that it was a great opportunity to show what my team had done. And the idea that we had was to do an exchange of value between our refrigerator that had a K-Cup built into it and our potential customer's refrigerator plus $200 or $300 to find out if people would be willing to pay for an upgrade to their refrigerator to get this K-Cup feature built into it.
Ironically, I was at a home show last week, and they had that refrigerator there with a K-Cup built in, and I think it probably added $20,000 to the value of the house because everybody was kind of crowded around it with with envy.
Yeah. People really like the feature, but it wasn't something. It sounded like a crazy idea internally at the time, and you think that businesses think about these types of projects. The typical thought process that goes around a project like this is, okay, it's going to cost us something like $10 or $15 million to actually completely develop and tool up for the product. We think we can get a certain number of dollars, maybe $150 incrementally, and maybe a certain number of floor spaces. And so they multiply the incremental number by the number of floor spaces and the amount of volume they can get for a floor space and say, does that cover the cost in the right amount of time? So they're looking for an ROI or an internal rate of return. And from conventional methods, like that method doesn't work very well for some of these projects where you really, really don't know that much about the market.
Right.
And so this was one that had been getting kicked around and frequently pushed aside. So we thought that this method that was new to us, using the scientific method to approach finding out if people would be willing to pay a certain amount of money for a product, was a really cool idea. So we got effectively another air quote, but funded for this project. And so we'd been given kind of the stamp of approval from the business to do it. Well, what we found was the stamp of approval from the business was one thing, but actually figuring out how to execute it was another. So as an example, we were supposed to figure out how to take money from customers, from actual consumers. We didn't have any way to do that. So strike one against us. Strike two was we had the design, we took it to the factory, and the factory said, we don't know how to build 10 units of anything. Right. So we can't really get you. They said they'd do it, but it was we'll maybe get to it in a month or two. And we kept getting pushed off. And then the third big question that everyone had was, how are you going to get a refrigerator out into the marketplace when it hasn't gone through all the reliability testing? And there were big concerns from the brand that this could end up being a stain on our reputation. And so from that experience, and so effectively the program actually got canceled. And so I was sitting in this place thinking, I just went through this kind of entrepreneurial experience. I pitched my idea, but it didn't go anywhere. And I didn't know what was next for me. So I decided I was going to try something new. And I found out that there was a team that was working on figuring out how to solve those exact problems. And that team was the FirstBuild team. So I was one of the early founding members of the FirstBuild team. And what we realized through the kind of hard experience of trying to figure out how to be entrepreneurial within within a large organization was the large organization is really optimized for making your current system perform. And it's not really designed for figuring out how to make something new work. Right. And so we figured out that there are these hurdles that exist, and we needed to figure out how to clear the hurdles. So FirstBuild's founding team was trying to figure out how to solve for the impediments that existed to getting innovative new product out. So what we decided we were going to do, this was back in 2014, was first thing, we needed to have a place where we could build anything that we could imagine. So you got to imagine a lot of the people that are involved in this, in fact, I think all of us were engineers, and we were very, very enthusiastic about the opportunity to see the ideas that existed typically just in the R&D lab and couldn't get beyond that stage. We're very excited to see them come out in the world. So how big
was that team?
Sorry, that was the early team. Like there were 5 to 10 of us. By the time we got fully upscale and running, it's about 20. And we've said that 20 is about the right number for the size of the team for FirstBuild. Mm-hmm. When we first started, again, all engineers, and all of us were really, really hyped up on figuring out how to manufacture and design the products. We didn't know that much about the sale process. So we said we're going to be able to make any product that we need. And this is anything from a small appliance to a big appliance. We said that we're going to have to be able to have a channel to sell it. And specifically, we didn't want anyone to tell us how we couldn't sell it. So in our business, and I think it's true for many businesses, there's channel conflict that occurs where you've got a customer who may want to make sure that you're only selling in a certain way. So for us, the concern was, how can we sell stuff online? Because we knew that online sales would probably be the fastest way for us to get up and sell stuff. And then the third thing that we needed to make sure was to have our own brand so that no one could tell us that we can't use the GE brand to sell something. So we created a FirstBuild brand. And along with those 3 things, we found that, first of all, those helped us overcome a lot of the conflict that existed, a lot of the impediments that existed. And so then we said, okay, how are we going to do this? If this is really about innovation and really about lean startup practices, then we need to make sure that we are investing small amounts of time and effort into any one idea until we know whether or not it's a good idea. So our KPIs for the project were, we're going to be able to make about 12 products a year, and we're not going to spend any more than 90 days on any given project before we get it into the market. So 90 days from mind to market, 12 projects a year, and one of those projects needs to become a core GE Appliances product every single year so that there's continuous innovation happening. So those were the kind of founding principles of what we put together with FirstBuild.
Those kind of metrics that you kind of set around, was that just kind of 90 days seems like the right amount of time to see if we can get traction or not, and then kill it or keep it going? Or how did you kind of come up with the 90 days and the 12 products and that?
The 12 products was purely driven by the sense that there's a lot of ideas, and the ideas tend to not get their play. So if you got a team of 20 people, the default thing to think is that this team of 20 people could at best do one product every year. Mm-hmm. Then you look at that team of 20 people and you say 20 people you think about what it might cost for 20 people. So right. Maybe $3 million a year or something like that for the headcount. And you think that's $3 million you're investing in a product before you know anything about it. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't seem like a good choice from a lean startup perspective, right? So then you back calculate and you think, okay, if I got these 20 people, I'm doing 12 a year. 20 divided by 12 is about $250,000 in effort that we put into it. I think I did the math right there. And so that starts to seem like a more reasonable investment for us to put behind a specific product. So that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah. And also knowing that like you need to have more than one bet, because your chance of having that one particular product bet be 100% right is.
And so we expect with those 12 products a year, we expect maybe 2 or 3 of them to be successful to the point where we take it beyond a minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. Now, 90 days, where did that come from? 90 days means effectively a minimum viable product. So it could mean we build a prototype and we put it up for sale on our website. Right. It also could mean it's 90 days sprint to a crowdfunding campaign where we don't have the product available for sale yet, but we have a pitch, a price point, and a picture of the product that we can make available for people. But 90 days felt like about the right amount of time to put together a prototype and get a minimum viable product together. Mm-hmm. It's not too short, meaning you have enough time to kind of consider and make a good product experience and think more about the consumer and get some feedback. But it's not too long where you're not spending too much time. So it was kind of a gut feel thing. And frankly, I don't think we knew on day one it was going to be 90 days. But within 6 months or so, we understood that 90 days was a reasonable time frame for us to get something done. So as an example, and this still sounds crazy to a lot of people, but FirstBuild's done it 4 or 5 different times where they've been able to come up with a product concept that starts as an idea in March, and by the end of May or June, it's actually a fully running crowdfunding campaign and is being fully funded. So it's amazing what can actually be done when you put the team's effort toward, and when you give that insane timeline of 90 days. And you get the team's full effort and concentration put behind it.
Yeah, I think having that constraint actually helps folks go faster. And I would imagine that 90 days is significantly faster than the traditional process that's been done.
Yeah, and it's not an apples to apples measurement. So people quite often ask us, so how does this compare? The difference between this and typical product development, when you think of typical product development, a lot of people think of measuring from the time that the engineering team first digs in and starts working on it. And you'd probably say that's 18 months to 2-year process. The truth of the matter is a lot of the early development of a project or a product starts in the ideation phase. And for us, that process can be on the quick end, 6 months, and on the long end, anywhere from 2 to 7 years, right? We actually we talk about ideas for a long time frequently before we do anything about them. Yeah. So the way that we measure it, really, we look at the amount of time it takes us to get from the original concept to the amount of time it takes us to get to the point where it's offered available for sale. It's a very different way of measuring it because most product development processes don't foresee the opportunity to have something available for sale before it's available to ship. Mm-hmm. And so available for sale, we can literally be there, and you could be there in a week. You could be there in 4 weeks. You could be there in 90 days. Available to ship on hardware products usually doesn't happen for 18 months to 2 years, right, for almost any product you can imagine.
Very interesting. So you got it up and going. You're working with this, I think you called it the Microfactory. So what are some of the things that happened through that particular process?
Yeah, a lot of folly. Like the first 6 months was just one mistake or one challenge after another. So I told the story in reverse and made it sound like it's pretty obvious what those obstacles were. But we didn't fully understand what obstacles we were trying to avoid for the first 6 months. So I'll give you an example of some of the challenges that we had. One that was really interesting was there was an idea that existed in one of the R&D labs. There had been an industrial designer and an engineer who had worked on this project. It was a range that had 2 ovens in it, an upper oven and a lower oven. So imagine a 36-inch range that's got the stove on the top. Generally, you have one oven. This one had 2 ovens. And the challenge that the designer had come up with was this upper oven was like about 9 inches tall. So you open this door, hinged door, and in order to get your tray of cookies or whatever, you kind of have to put your arm inside the oven in order to reach that tray of cookies. And since it's a narrow cavity, there's a decent chance you're going to touch yourself. You're going to burn yourself. And so the idea that this designer had was, let's make it so you have a slight hinge on the door, but the door actually pulls out like a drawer. So the top oven, that narrow one, is actually a drawer that pulls out. So you pull it out and then you set your cookies on the top and then you push it back in. Really, really cool idea. It was an idea that for one reason or another, just like many ideas, our core business didn't pick up on. And FirstBuild's team saw it and said, this is a product that we definitely want to make. So for us, what that looked like was get an oven in, take the oven apart, replace some of the parts, and then ship it out the door. Well, we knew how to do everything about that process except how to figure out how to sell it. And we were very, very stubborn early on about how we were going to sell products. Very, very staunch process around wanting to make sure that we sold this thing online, because we said we want to prove that we can sell these appliances online. So imagine a bunch of engineers putting together an e-commerce platform, opening it up on day one and saying, you're going to buy this new product from a brand you've never heard of. That's a $2,000 product. You don't know how you're going to get shipping, service, warranty, or anything. And you're going to buy it today and we're going to ship it to you. That's not something that really is going to work very well. But it was a process we had to go through to understand what the problems with it would be. So what ended up happening, which worked really well for us, was we have independent dealers all across the nation who are clamoring to have something new and unique that they can sell, that they can say, this is unique. You can't get this anywhere else. Right. So ultimately, after trying many different ways to figure out how to sell this thing online, we went and we hired a salesperson at FirstBuild. We had that person go and talk to dealers about it. And they were able to find lots of dealers who wanted to have the product in. We were able to test the price point on a real sales floor against real product and prove that there was a value proposition to add $200 to this product, that people would really buy it. Right. And then the next thing that happened was our factory got flooded with orders for this product. And it was, we built this thing as a microfactory. So our vision was we'd be able to build 1,000 units of anything. Well, this started kind of overtaking our ability to build the other stuff we wanted to build. We'd proven what we wanted to prove. And so you'd think the next natural step would be, we've proven what we need to prove. There's no more uncertainty about what the business model is. So GE Appliances is going to pick it up and take it.
Put it back into the mothership and go.
Yeah, back to the mothership. Well, this one still has yet to go back to the mothership. They looked at the data and it wasn't compelling enough. And so you're going to, from one misstep to the next. So that was an interesting journey. I think some of the other things that we learned, I'll give you an example around a crowdfunding campaign. Initially, I think we were really, really skittish about running crowdfunding campaigns. There was a lot of concern that a crowdfunding campaign would be seen as disingenuous because it had GE's name behind it. And at that point in time, crowdfunding was being seen as a way for entrepreneurs to get their startup capital. But we looked at it and we saw it as the best way to prove a value proposition for a product. Because there's no commitment if you don't hit your funding goal. So if you can't generate enough interest in your product, then you're not required to go forward with it. And you've really invested a relatively small amount. And so we decided that it was something that we had to try. The first crowdfunding campaign we ran was for a sous vide product. Sous vide is a way of making your foods you vacuum seal your food in a bag, you submerge it under water, and it brings the food up to a temperature. So it's great for steak. Anyone who wants to know more about it can reach out to me afterward. But this product was going to be a very unique product. And it was the benefit of the product to us was it's sous vide on a burner instead of with a standalone immersion circulator design. So there are some designs that really didn't fit well with our product portfolio. In this case, we were designing something that would fit very well. The technology would work very well across the board with GE Appliances cooking platform. And so we decided we were going to run a crowdfunding campaign. And we said, true to form, we're not going to spend more than 90 days on this. So I think it was December 2014. We came up with the idea. We slapped a price point on it, put together a prototype, and literally took video of this plastic prototype that looked like it was kind of working, but really was just a plastic prototype of the thing that we knew that we could build because we had a lot of cooktop experience. And by February of the following year, 2015, we had launched a crowdfunding campaign. And our first crowdfunding campaign did $350,000, which for us, that was the biggest single product that we had at that point. We were less than a year old at that stage, which gave us this pretty strong indication that crowdfunding was going to be a good way for us to take our products out to market. And it turned out to be, a very successful way for us to prove a value proposition in particular. And then the product design and some of the technology that we designed for that ended up becoming technology in GE Appliances cooktops, and still is actually one of our very unique offerings that no competition has yet caught up with us on.
That's the end of another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about our team and the content and other services we have to offer, check out insideoutside.io. Until next time, go out and innovate.